That is to first create a trust-based, loving relationship with yourself.
Oh, interesting.
And if I cannot do that, if I don't have that with myself, I can't do it with or for other people.
Mm.
And in the way we do it with ourselves, there's a lot of different things, and we could spend a lot of time, but I do 3 primary things that have created more growth in my life mentally than any things I've ever done. Number 1 is I meditate every day, 5 days a week, I should say. I journal, what I call brain download, 5 days a week. And I am mindful. I practice mindfulness. And those are all practicing things, by the way, because you never at one point say, I'm done. I'm now a great meditator. I'm now mindful. No, it's not going to. So those things have allowed me to have grace for myself and have created more love and patience in my life, which is then allows me to help and do it and promote it with others.
This is the Workplace Therapist Show, and of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of this show is one singular thing, and that is to help you have better conversations at work and ultimately healthier relationships at work. And so I'm really excited about our conversation today. We're going to talk about coaching, and we're going to talk about how to make you a better coach. And so to help us on this journey, I have an amazing expert, Bill Eckstrom. Bill, really good to kind of have you on the show today.
Well, Brandon, thank you. It's an honor to be with you.
Yeah, really excited. So before we kind of jump into our show today, I want to make sure I properly set you up. So you're not only the author of The Coaching Effect, which we'll talk about your book, but also the founder and CEO of Excel Institute. So I feel really honored to have you on the show today. So I want to talk about coaching. I want to talk about your book and some of the findings that you found in your book. And then we can actually even pivot into some practical ways everyone watching and listening today can become a better coach, whether just in general or particularly in virtual land, which is where we're all living today. But before we do that, I would love to get a little bit of story time from you. Tell us a little more about the work you do today and how you got doing that.
Well, thank you for that setup. The work we do today is all about we take a research and science-based approach to understanding the performance leaders, coaches, and managers have on their teams. And we do this, we started this in the world of business, specifically in sales departments. And it has since evolved well beyond the sales realm to all departments within organizations, because they all have managers or leaders or coaches. We prefer the word coach over leader or manager, by the way. But we've also, since we've been kind of sucked into athletics. So now we do it for athletic teams.
Wow.
And recently have been brought into academics. So we're measuring the impact teachers have on the students in their classrooms. So that's our background. I think the second part of your question was how I got in there.
Yeah. What got you doing this or interested in this?
You know, there are 3 significant events in my life that either created or helped catapult both myself and our business. Number 1 came from what was originally thought to be a very negative event. And I talked about this in the TED Talk, but I got fired from my job. And that forced me to do a lot of soul searching, of course. And that also was the motivator for starting the Excel Institute. So that was trigger number 1. Trigger number 2 was the TED Talk that I was able to do that went viral. That has really helped my brand and personally catapult a lot of the things I do, a lot of the speaking, and it's interesting, the perceived credibility you get from doing something like that. And people don't even know me, but all of a sudden I'm an expert. They don't even know my background.
Right.
And the third is the book that the president of our company, Sarah Worth, and I created called the coaching effect.
Mm.
And those three items are really kind of a lot of this professionally were very pivotal points for me.
Fantastic. So I want to go back to something you said earlier on. Kind of originally, it started kind of with sales, but then it's translated into so many other professions and industries and worlds. Uh, in my limited view of the sales function and my time spent in that arena, it seems like there's always this desire for sales folks who are really skilled to become player coaches. So we need you to become a player coach. Can you be a player coach? Hit your numbers, but then get these other 5 people to hit their numbers. Is that part of what started this idea of player coach? Is that kind of what you were seeing, or was it something else?
No, it was a realization, Brandon. Well, first of all, let me acknowledge what you said, because yes, that happens a lot. But it was a realization that the performance of teams, everybody believes this, by the way. Well, not true. 99% of people believe this. The performance of teams are always a reflection of how they're coach led and managed. And everybody would say, oh, of course, yes, that is true. I believe that. Absolutely. So take a sales department as an example. If you believe that, then why is it sales departments get 95, salespeople get 95% of the resources? When I say resources, not just developmental resources, I'm talking about metric resources. People know how often they go to coffee. They know if they stop for a donut. Their moves are all tracked and monitored. We can tell you how often they're on the phone, how many calls they've made, how many openings, closes, so on and so forth, right? But yet all the executives believe how well they do reflects how they're coach led and managed. And so our response is, okay, what are the coaches, leaders, and managers doing? You're tracking all these things about salespeople, how much they do and how well they do it. How about their leaders? And nobody can answer that. So it's backwards. So we're saying these people have the biggest impact on the performance, but yet we know nothing about them. Nothing.
So
that was my motivation.
That's a nice segue. So what have you learned? What are those things that coaches do that are some of those kind of the secret sauce or ingredients that really are transformative?
Well, it's taken thousands and thousands and thousands of surveys across the world between, surveying leaders, surveying frontline employees, and everything in between. We've measured now about 150,000 coaching interactions in the workplace between employees and their bosses. And what we've learned is, while there's many, many things that, and keep in mind, when we are talking about this, we're talking about growth, not performance. I could separate those things. We're talking about the leaders that create the most growth. Usually performance follows if you've got a lot of growth going on. So when we studied that growth, there were 4 primary things that the great ones were doing, in no specific order. They were doing career development plans with the people on their teams. They would do them manually, but do updates quarterly. They did team meetings, consistent team meetings. Now, what's interesting is everybody thinks, oh, they did those, the highest growth people do those weekly, right? No, actually, they only do them monthly, but they do them differently than everybody else. They do one-on-one meetings uber consistently every other week. Now that's evolving with work from home, but they did one-on-one meetings every other week, and they gave objective written feedback at least quarterly. Now, when I say those things, Brandon, my guess is you're not sitting there. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at you right now. You're not going, gee, Bill, that's rocket science. Wow, never heard of any of those things. But here's what's unique about it. While that's what the greatest leaders, coaches are doing consistently, still nobody, and most all of them do those things, by the way, to some degree. Nobody knows how often. Nobody measures to know if they're doing them well. if people say, well, yeah, my leaders spend a lot of time with their people. Okay, but did they spend 80% of the time with the bottom 20% of their people, or vice versa?
Mm.
How much time should they allocate between your top performers, middle performers, and bottom performers? Nobody knows. So it's one thing to hear those activities and realize that, yeah, those make sense. But that it's another thing to say, but I know how well and how often they're being done.
Okay, so there's so many places for me to dive into this. So I'm just gonna start at the beginning and dive in. I'm gonna try and do this in order as best I can remember. So the first thing you said was the professional development conversations,
Career development
career development conversations, and you said they do that once a year, but then they do quarterly check-in. Is that right?
Correct.
So while that's not rocket science, I mean, when I'm looking at a lot of employee engagement surveys, even feedback surveys, 360 feedback that are done, I'll internally, I'll see that's a common ask. They'll say, I'm not getting any professional development conversations from my manager. Well, they'll schedule it, but then they just want to talk about the project I'm working on, which is not the same as career development or professional development. They hijack it. So is there any tips that you could give in terms of how that conversation should be structured, or any other guidance to help kind of preserve it and keep it pure? Because I'm finding it's getting corrupted a lot. Like, that's what I'm hearing, at least.
Brandon, that's really, you bring up a good point, and you're right. They do get hijacked, or they're masked as a annual review. So there are, as a matter of fact, in our book, if people want to buy our book, in there is a link to where they can actually go get the form that we use.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Okay. So that's functionally, but what they need to do is, so it's really interesting, is everybody thinks, and so many times people are afraid because they say, well, I don't know if they're, we don't have any really room for promotions. There's no many. Well, it's not a promotion conversation. It's a development conversation. And people have to separate those two. For example, in sales departments, we know that 95 to 96%, somewhere between there, of salespeople don't have the talents to be a great coach. So that means those conversations, while you may have to have more of them, there's probably only 4 to 5% of people that really are worthy of promoting into a leadership role.
Yeah.
And therefore, the conversations have to shift away from being getting promoted and growing can be two separate things.
That's a great distinction.
To grow skills in any role is wonderful. That doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager or coach or leader.
And what I love about the way,
what I love has to shift from promotion to growth.
What I love about the way you said that too is we have control over growth. We can always be growing. We don't have control over promotion. How many times have people been promised a promotion? They're like, oh yeah, sorry, things changed. I know I told you I'm going to promote you this year. We'll have to talk about it next year. And then people get frustrated. But growth can happen no matter what's going on around us, which I think is such an important focus you bring to us. Focus on growth, not so much about the politics of promotions, because that's what it is. It's political. Which means there's so many factors that go into that stew that are out of our control.
Right, exactly. And that's so well said. So if people just focus on what they can control, their own growth, and if coaches and leaders ask the right questions around that, the conversations can go from, wow, we didn't even talk about a promotion. We have talked about career aspirations.
Yeah.
Now, whether those involve promotions or not, but my job as a coach is not to promote you. My job as your coach in business, if I'm your manager, leader, whatever it is, my job is to help you grow, period.
Yeah.
It's not to promote you. It's to make you great based on your talents.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I see we're getting close to break. So when we come back from break, I think your second point of the 4 was one-on-ones. Is that correct?
Yes. One-on-one meetings and actually written objective feedback are the two strongest correlators to what we call discretionary effort.
Let's absolutely talk about that. right after break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back, and then we'll continue with Bill as he kind of guides us on how we should be really spending our time with our folks to coach them up and help them grow. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for listening to the show. In case you haven't heard, Brandon's got a new book out. He's going to tell you all about it.
Thanks, Emily. So the book is The Hot Sauce Principle, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time. And if you're like me, and like most of us, everything does feel urgent all the time. It's like hot sauce is being poured on everything, whether it's our work life, our family life, coming from our clients, coming from our boss. And so the book is a practical guide on how do we manage urgency. Not only how do we set proper boundaries, but how do we properly create urgency when we need to. So I wrote the book for you. I can't wait for you to get a copy.
Thanks, Brandon. Don't forget to check out The Hot Sauce Principle, available now on Amazon.com. Back to the show.
Welcome back from break. Of course, this is the Workplace Therapy Show, and Bill Eckstrom's been guiding us on how you can be a better coach. And already I'm just like, amen, brother. This is fantastic. So we talked about, right before break, about the importance of those career conversations and kind of the regular rhythm throughout the year and keeping them pure. Now we're going to pivot into two other points. We're going to combine them the way kind of Bill set it up right before break. We're going to talk about one-on-ones and that written feedback and the importance of that as part of kind of this coaching process. So before we jump into this, Bill, there was a word you said around the one-on-ones, which I was like, hallelujah, I'm so glad you said it. You used the word consistent. So please tell us a little bit more about why that word is so important, consistent with the one-on-ones.
Well, it first of all, when you think about a one-on-one meeting, and you just step back from it all, the role of a coach, the role of a manager or leader, their job is to drive discretionary effort. And when I use that term, discretionary effort, what I mean is we know that, if I'm an employee, my boss, if they're not there or they're not around, especially now work from home, that doesn't mean I have the day off too. If my boss is sick, I don't have a free day. I get paid to do my job, right?
Right.
So the question is, or the concept of discretionary effort is, how much better do I do my job with the boss? How much more engaged am I? How many more calls do I make? How many more hours do I work? If a sales team will sell $10 million without a leader, they better sell 12 or $14 million with a leader, right? That gap is the value a coach or leader brings to a team. So one-on-one meetings, getting back to your question, are the second highest correlator to driving discretionary effort. Now, when you think about that, so every time you're not consistent in holding a one-on-one meeting, that means you are allowing discretionary effort to go away. And here's what's an interesting statistic that comes from our research. When we ask leaders, coaches, and say, hey, do you hold one-on-one meetings with your people? Oh, yes, of course I do, Bill. Great. How often do you do it? Oh, we do it weekly. Okay. How often do you make those meetings? Oh, probably 95% of the time. Then we research the people that report to them. They say
I know where this
45
is
going. To 50%.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it was going to drop off that much.
That
wow.
much.
Wow.
Right. And the actual, so that's what they say. Here's the fact.
You hurt my heart, Bill. You hurt my heart.
Only 60% of the time they're actually held. 4 out of 10 times, for whatever reason, sometimes they're legitimate, of course, one-on-one meetings are not held. 4 out of 10 times.
I can only imagine the message that signals about what really matters.
Right. So if I report to you and you 3 out of 10 times are canceling our one-on-one meeting, that means 30% of the time you have something that is more important than me. Period.
Woof.
That's what I think. And that's what you're saying without even saying it.
Oh, I mean, my mind's already racing to person not feeling as valued. It hurts trust. You're not able to hold the person accountable and keep that level of discretionary effort up. I mean, there's so many things that get lost when there's those cancellations.
Oh, there are.
So,
Yeah. And work from home really can exacerbate that. It really can.
say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, what's really interesting is the highest growth coaches, believe it or not, were only doing one-on-one meetings every other week, but they do them with like 88% frequency. I mean, they just don't miss very often. So they do them every other week. They do them for an hour, and they do them at roughly a 90% clip, right? 9 out of 10 times they're there. They're making it.
Yep.
They're consistent. What we're seeing from work from home is they need to, that we don't have the actual data on this yet, but what we're seeing and what we're about ready to substantiate is that the most effective coaches, leaders are doing them weekly. They're having to go from every other week to weekly.
Wow. So they're going from every other week to weekly. So they're doubling their time they're spending with their people.
Yep.
Wow.
Because all those little sidebar conversations that you alluded to earlier are gone. I can't stick my head in somebody's office and say, "Hey, you got just a couple of minutes?" All those things are now added to a list that we talk about once a week.
Yeah. Well, but that kind of makes sense. They're trying to increase that connection, so they're intentional about doubling their efforts, but they're still maintaining the consistency, which I think is so key. Oh.
You're right. Consistency is doing them is really that's top, and then doing them well. So there's the quantity of the activity and the quality of the activity. Actually, quality, when you look at all these as a whole, supersedes quantity, because if I suck at one-on-one meetings and now my boss tells me I have to go hold more one-on-one meetings with my people, if I'm bad at it, I'm actually creating negative discretionary effort.
Yeah, that's fair. So maybe that's a good dovetail into, you said there was, the other one you said was highly correlated with, I don't know if it's discretionary effort or just overall
Correct.
impact, but was this written feedback piece. Tell us about that one.
Well, it's really interesting in that this, to so many people, sounds like a surprise. When the entire world of, you take the highest growth, highest performing people, and you can usually tie some of it, unfortunately or fortunately, back to the world of athletics, right?
Yep.
Where the elite very much separate from everybody else. And when you look at the things they do, whether it's a golfer or a football player or a gymnast, a diver, they have film. They get feedback constantly. They are graded on scales, not just on game day or meet day or event day. We're talking about every practice. And yet in business, the objective is to grow. The objective is to help people grow and perform at higher levels. But yet written feedback is a rare component of their developmental journey. So it is the idea that I understand not just from a task and duty standpoint, but the skills involved for you to be the most successful in your role. And for me not to provide you that game film, so to speak, which is a written feedback of how you're doing those skills, both in terms of quantity and quality, I'm not helping you grow as a coach.
So is the reason why we don't do that, I'm thinking of two things in my mind, and I want you to help me kind of figure out which one it is, or if it's something else or a combination of these. Is it because we're just not putting forth the effort because it requires a lot of work to do that? Or is it because we're afraid we're going to hurt the person's feelings, have an uncomfortable conversation, so we avoid that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I thought you might perhaps say that.
Yeah, you've pretty much nailed it. There's those are, I would say, the two primary reasons. Is I want to avoid conflict, But see, here we go again. The fact that I am not willing to accept or face conflict means I'm not very good as a coach. So why am I in that role, right?
Right.
But yes, that's a reason. And the other being, it is harder work. It is, and it's change, it's evolution. I've never done that. That's not been part of who I am or what I do. Right. Well, you're asking your people to grow and develop. Now, how about you as a leader do the same thing, right? It's time for you to evolve. But yeah, to do that well quarterly, it's work. But being a great coach or a great leader is work. So yes, it is additional work. And yes, they should do it because that single activity has the strongest correlation to discretionary effort.
I just looked over to my right and Emily held up, she wrote really big. She said, what are some of the things that a coach or leader should be saying in their one-on-ones?
In their one-on-ones, first of all, this is going to sound to someone like you so obvious, but the great leaders and coaches always start each one-on-one off with personal updates.
Oh, great.
They're creating, and the reason you do that is you are creating trust-based relationships, which are foundational to growth and performance. That is the bottom of the pyramid. You have to do that. So believe it or not, a lot of people look at that and go, oh, well, gee, duh, you have to tell us to do this. I know to do that. But you'd be surprised at the number of people go, really? I have to do that with every one-on-one? I should be doing that? Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
So there are components to further relationships. So personal updates are used as an example of that. Of course, things like progress to goal. But it's more than anything, it's as a coach or a leader, you don't be asking questions you can find otherwise. So if I can find data on you through a CRM, for example, I'm not going to ask you the questions that I can see right here in front of me. So progress to goal, your role, what will they do differently? So there has to be components of relationship development, structure and accountability, be it challenge. What are we going to do differently? How are we going to grow?
Yeah. Nice. So I want to hit the last component you mentioned of the four. You mentioned team meetings, but what surprised me around that is you said a lot of them are only doing them once a month. Tell me a little bit more about the team meetings and what you discovered in that.
Yeah. So when we went into this, we thought the great leaders, coaches were going to be doing team meetings weekly. Well, we were wrong. They were doing them monthly, but we were also discovering that they did them uniquely, meaning that if I'm a leader of a department or a division and I have 8 direct reports, once a month, I have a meeting with my direct reports. Now, what's interesting is where our research began was remotely because it involves sales leaders and salespeople. And they had salespeople that were scattered across, a region. So almost all their meetings were done remotely anyway.
Yeah.
And they're still only doing a monthly. So what it involves, again, there's team progress to goal. There's always an engaging, ice-breaking question to start. Now, not always an exercise, but an ice-breaking question. And then there are different components of the meeting. Like there's the developmental component, there's an informational component, but all these things, sans perhaps the informational component, they need to rotate. What makes meetings bad are multiple reasons, but one of which, the primary reason, it's my manager talks. That's it.
Oh.
I am the all-knowing and all wisdom. I will partake, I will share with you my wisdom over this next hour, and they get all done. They wonder why there's little engagement in that meeting.
So it becomes a big kind of they're preaching a sermon rather than really going around and having the team spend most of the time
right. So
engaging.
If they're going to do, for example, skill development, why wouldn't they rotate that through the people in their teams to have them do a component of skill development?
Yeah.
If they're sharing best practices, I'm not out there doing it. It should be our people sharing best practices. if there's note taking involved, I don't have to do it. We have to rotate that throughout the meeting.
Yeah.
And that's a way to run an effective team meeting, is to always have components. There should be a developmental component, progress to goal component, an intellectual skill development component, and a bonding component.
Yeah.
So at the end, you've tapped on all those boxes for an effective meeting.
And that's all in your book. Is that correct?
Correct.
Fantastic. Yes. So I know we're really at time, but I want to keep going for one last question. Before we move into, because I could ask you so many questions, Bill, before I go into kind of our life hack. So you hinted at one last thing I want to make sure we touch on. Where they're spending their time, top 20% high performers, kind of the middle of the curve, or the kind of the bottom 20% underperformers. What were some of the things you found in terms of where they're dedicating their time and effort?
Well, that's a good question. And, believe it or not, that shifts a little bit by company and by role.
Okay.
But primarily, the best are spending it with their people. They're everybody, if you're in a leadership role, a management role, you have a responsibilities outside of, you have tasks and duties outside of getting your people to perform. But if you want to scale, the only way to scale is to get people to grow. And so they spend a disproportionate amount of time with their people, providing feedback, doing one-on-one meetings, team, all those activities. And they, unfortunately, the lowest performing spend a disproportionate amount of time to the bottom performers.
Okay.
The highest performing coaches, leaders, are spending about a 50-50 split between the top 20% and the middle 60, which is interesting.
Okay. Nice. Okay, great. Fantastic. Bill, this was great. So I always ask all my guests this question: what's one life hack you have for us on how we could improve our conversations or relationships, either at work or at home?
So ask me that again, please. I want to make sure I answer it correctly.
Yeah. So one life hack, so simple kind of hack, tip, or trick on how we can improve either our conversations at work or our conversations and relationships at home. So
I'll answer it and then I'll support it if that's okay.
Sure.
That is to first create a trust-based, loving relationship with yourself.
Oh, interesting.
And if I cannot do that, if I don't have that with myself, I can't do it with or for other people. And in the way we do it with ourselves, there's a lot of different things, and we could spend a lot of time, but I do 3 primary things that have created more growth in my life mentally than any things I've ever done. Number 1 is I meditate every day, 5 days a week, I should say. I journal, what I call brain download, 5 days a week. And I am mindful. I practice mindfulness. And those are all practicing things, by the way, because you never at one point say, I'm done. I'm now a great meditator. I'm now mindful. No, it's not going through. So those things have allowed me to have grace for myself and have created more love and patience in my life, which then allows me to help and do it and promote it with others.
That's beautiful. That's fantastic. I love that. I think that's so simple. Slightly different turn than I thought you were going to take. You started to say trust and loving relationship, and then I thought you were going to say with others, and you said with yourself. And I thought, oh, that makes so much sense, because I can almost play an example. If you're doing negative self-talk to yourself, well, that's how you're going to show up with other people. So I love
exactly right.
I love you gave those tactical practices that we can put in place. So, Bill, if people want to learn more about you, more about the great work you and your team are doing, or buy a copy of the book, where can they go?
Well, thank you for that opportunity. The book is called The Coaching Effect, and it is on Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble. It's on all the great outlet bookstores, so you can get it online there. You can learn more about a lot of this stuff in the TED Talk that I did, which is called Why Comfort Will Ruin Your Life.
It's a great TED Talk, by the way. Fantastic.
Thank you very much, which is an interesting journey, understanding that piece. Our company is Excel Institute, which is ECSELL Institute.com. And they can find more about our company there. I have a personal website called BillEckstrom.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter, and anybody that reaches out to me, and I mean this quite literally, and I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, arguably thousands since the TED Talk. I respond to everybody. I connect with everybody. Unless somebody's immediately wanting something right out of the chute, like, they're just create a relationship with me first.
Yep.
That's all you have to do.
Yep.
So yes. It would be an honor to connect with everybody.
Well, this was an absolute gift. Thank you for coming on the show today and spreading your wisdom. I've learned a lot. It's helped me kind of see things that, as you said, maybe I've observed before, but put them in a different way that makes it clearer and easier, and most importantly, actionable. So I think that's a huge gift you've given me today and everybody I know who's been listening and watching. And for those of you listening and watching, thank you for listening and watching, and continue to kind of keep up the fight every week as we try and make our workplaces healthier through better conversations and better relationships. Of course, if you want additional resources, you can go to my site, theworkplacetherapist.com, for past podcasts, blogs, other articles. And if you haven't picked up a copy of my newest book, The Hot Sauce Principle, How to Live and Lead in a World Where Everything is Urgent All the Time, why haven't you? You totally should get that book. It will help you have a healthier life. So until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.